Throughout the Middle Ages, various types of shields were used in battle. These were used as defense, as blunt instruments, and they also served as status symbols. Let's take a look at what some of these shields were, how they were used, and how they evolved over time. If we look at the early years, the medieval ages, we find the round shield. Round shields were made of wood, and in the center of the shield was fastened what was called a metal boss. This metal boss protected the hand of the wearer. These shields provided an adequate amount of protection for the upper body, and I think what made these shields so popular was their use in the shield wall. Because of their circular shape, they were allowed to overlap really well with each other. This allowed the warriors who were fighting to stand really close. It allowed for minimal gaps between the shields for the weapons to get through. I think one thing that I found interesting when learning about round shields and the shield wall was how effective it was against horseback riders. If a horse were to just charge through a shield wall, it would be hurt really badly. And it's likely that the horse would shy away as well. If you were on top of the horse, to stab through the shield wall might have been really hard with how close the soldiers were. Let's take a look now at the kite shield, otherwise known as the teardrop shield. It got that name because it literally looks like a teardrop. These shields provided really good protection for the upper body as well as the leg. Really popular with cavalry. It allowed the horseback rider to sit on the horse while holding the shield and attack while also protecting his leg. I think they even were allowed to be able to hold the reins of the horse without the shield flopping all over the place too much. We would have seen these shields as early as the 11th century, but they're mostly popular with horseback riders. Not to say that foot soldiers didn't use them, but more commonly among the horseback. Fast forward to the 12th century and we would find the heater shield. A little bit of an involvement from the kite shield, but this is what you would typically think of when you think of a knight in shining armor, is that the shape of the heater shield. What made these shields so effective was that they allowed for great protection with the upper body and leg without being too large. This allowed them to be very popular on foot or on horse. It was very common for shields like these to have your coat of arms put on top of it. This was important because during the time, to show off who you were, your status, your nobility, your wealth, was a very popular thing to do. And we would have seen something like the coat of arms put on top of these shields. Let's take a look at a different class of soldier, particularly the archer. The archers would have used what was called a pavis shield. These shields were very tall, about 1.5 meters tall, or roughly 5 feet. They were able to rest on something, and the archer could sit behind it and be protected while also fighting. It was common for these shields to have the coat of arms put on them as well. I think what made these shields so effective during the time was their use in a wall, and not just any wall, a mobile wall. They were used in sieges as well. Let's step away from the battlefield a little bit and talk about a shield that was used among everybody, civilians and soldiers alike, and that shield was the buckler shield. These were very small, round shields, sometimes as small as 6 inches in diameter. Because of their size, they were allowed to be made with stronger materials such as steel without being too heavy. These shields allowed for very quick movements and very agile fighting. They were used among people in duels or close hand-to-hand combat. This shield is probably one of my personal favorites because just how bizarre it all seems. You wouldn't think that a shield that small could protect the way that it did. Although it was very ineffective against projectile weapons such as arrows, it was very effective against melee weapons in close combat. It could be used to protect the hand of whoever was fighting, to bash with. It could be used to pin the opponent's weapon against their body while also landing a strike. These shields, because of their size, were also able to act as a floating piece of armor, and because of their convex shape, it allowed for good deflection against a sword blow. These shields were used 12th century to 16th century, a long time frame, and like I said, they were used among everybody, civilians and soldiers. Let's take a look at the craftsmanship of shields. Each shield would have been unique to the wearer, and like I mentioned before, showing off your class, your wealth, your nobility was very important, and shields served as a status symbol. They would have passed through several different craftsmen during their construction phase, and as I mentioned in my last video, there are hundreds of different craftsmen in the Middle Ages. This is important because who made your shield, what kind of work was put into it, what kind of materials you used, how fine of materials you used, all showed the kind of warrior you were, how wealthy you were, how important you were, how good of a fighter you were. Shields, they were more than just protection. They were more than just a blunt object. They showed off who you were as a warrior and who you were as a person. They even showed off who your family was and where you came from. Now, as armor advanced through the Middle Ages, we see more plate armor. Shields became less and less used. I don't want to say less and less effective, because they were still effective, but they just weren't used as much. They started acting more as that status symbol. Thank you for watching, and until next time, this is goodbye from Guildstead.